Today I have a video for you guys that you're probably not going to expect from me to put together, and I didn't really. This is pretty much all credit goes to Modi, one of my mods, VIP, who is really knowledgeable at the game, specifically with POB stuff. Essentially what happened was I was playing Wands this league like most people were, and I was playing like the ES Life variant, and that variant is a little bit squishy, and I just had some issues with it, and I just thought I want to go in-stacking CI. I don't know how to get there. I just knew from playing last league there are so many like broken interactions between in-stacking and KB specifically because of the wand you're going to see in a little bit, but also just because in-stacking is really nice because it caps out your chaos res because you can go CI, and also it just gives you an insane energy shield pool. And also there's a combination with ES and EV that you can utilize on the tree, which kind of helps you get almost evasion cap pretty much for free. As far as this video goes, Modi did pretty much everything. I cannot stress that enough. He was the genius behind how everything was put together. I am merely the conduit to help explain to you how you can do this as well. But as I'm going to show you in this video, you can do it for pretty much just 200 div, maybe even a little less if you are willing to craft some of the gear yourself. I know some of you guys are thinking that 200 div is a crazy amount for me to say just 200, but in-stacking is generally considered to be a really expensive build archetype in PoE 1 just because of how expensive it is to craft the gear. So getting it down to 200 div was quite impressive, I thought, especially because the reason it's so good is because it gives you so much. Like, for example, we have a 100k hit pool as well as combined DPS of 2.6 million per projectile, of which we have quite a few depending on what flask you're going. I'm gonna walk you through the tree, the gear, and I'm also gonna walk you through how you can craft some of this stuff. So starting off with the tree, the first thing you might notice is that we are using 3 large passive cluster jewels. So these are going to be 12 passives. We are using them specifically for the small passives that we add. And we're gonna be going for a combination of all attributes, intelligence, max ES, and increase infect. Just pretty much increases the effect of the other 3 passives. We only care about those 3 passives, really. On top of that, we're going to be running a lot of unique jewels. I would say half of the budget is going to be in the jewels and the other half is going to be in the gear. We really do care about jewels for this build. We're going to be running 3 large clusters that have the same 4 stats on all 3 of these large clusters, which is going to be some combination of int attributes, ES, and increase effect. One thing that's going to be really important for this video, for pretty much like this whole build, I'm going to have very detailed notes section here. And in the notes section, it's going to have trade filters. It's going to have an example for one of the viewers that Modi helped out actually set up this whole build with real numbers on how much they actually spent on everything. This isn't just like hypothetical. This is the actual numbers that they used to essentially gear this guy's character from scratch. And it only cost them 195 div. But notably here, these are specific breakpoints for the cluster jewels. You might notice that like for cluster jewels, normally you really care about having 35% increased effect because that's generally a breakpoint for certain things. Like for example, if you have 3% attack speed, getting 35% actually gives you an additional point, but 25% doesn't do anything because 70% of a point. In PoE, you always round down. Specifically for these clusters, because the rolls ranges are so high, since we're going for something like +4 all attributes some of the time, 25% increased effect will actually sometimes be just as good as a worse rolled 35% increased effect jewel. These are like 20 something div each. But this is like the min roll that we'd really accept. I mean, you arguably could go a little bit lower on the ES, a little bit lower on the intelligence, that kind of thing. This is roughly what you want. And if you wanted to pay a little bit more, which I think it's worth it for these clusters because they give you a lot of value, take a look at these breakpoints. Awesome. From here, we're going to be going double split personality. These just essentially give us more int, more ES, but they give you more value the further away you are from your starting point. And as you can see, we are quite far away. So these give you a ton of value. One important thing to note here is that if you do something like this, you get less value out of your split personality because this is the same distance as this. Whereas if you go over here, this ends up being a little bit further away. It's like 3 points further. It's a small min max, but just something worth noting. And after that, we're going to be going for a Watcher's Eye that has evade hits with grace. It helps us get to our 91% evade chance here that we're going to have. And also it gives us increased critical strike chance with Wrath. These are quite cheap. These are like 3 or 4 div each on trade right now. We get our 91% evade chance with the help of this Watcher's Eye, of course, but also because of this mastery here, which essentially just gives us increased evasion per 5 intelligence. This combined with grace, combined with the Watcher's Eye, and also our Jade Flask helps us get to 91% evade, which is only 4% off from the evade hit cap. This is just efficient, more damage, more projectiles, crit, attributes, crit multi, and then we get stuff like CI, which is how we're going to fix our chaos problems, and pretty much like a huge part of why it even makes sense to go in stacking or heavily into ES in the first place. And then also Ghost Reaver in conjunction with this node here, which gives us 5% of our leech instantly, just makes it so pretty much if we don't get one shot and we're constantly attacking because we can't get stunned, we can't get frozen, that kind of stuff, which I'll show you in a little bit how we do that, makes it so we can't die. Pretty much instantly after we take damage, we will be able to leech it all back up because we do so much damage and we have so much leech. The downside though is that you can't regen energy shield, which won't really matter because we will be CI immune, we will be ailment immune. So we won't really be taking damage unless we are in a position where we can fight back and leech life. Notably here, we also get the Mark Mastery, which will help us with our Frenzy Charge generation. And then a lot of this other stuff is just like Cobalt Jewels, which we will have a link to a weighted sum, which you can kind of play with here to find jewels at the appropriate price range for what you would want. I would probably say you'd want to spend like at least a div on your jewels for your Cobalt, for your Abyss jewels, your CB jewel. We're going to want to have one of our jewels give us Corrupted Blood immunity. As a result, you're going to have a worse jewel. It's still going to be like a div, but you're going to have like 1 or 2 less lines or like, 20 less sum for the weighted sum. That's okay. Having Corrupted Blood immunity is incredibly important and just very, very nice quality of life. From here, we're going to get a Storm Shroud, which essentially makes it so if we avoid shocks, we can avoid all ailments and we'll be able to avoid shock pretty easily through our gear, as you will see during the gear section in a little bit. And then just some like Searching Eye jewels to give us some more stats, but more importantly, chance to avoid stun. This, in conjunction with our flask, which I'll show you later, will give us a 100% chance to avoid stun, which will be incredibly important for our build because without avoid stun, we are going to be getting stunned on cooldown pretty much. The last thing to note is a Fertile Mind here. This just transforms all these dex nodes into int nodes, which is very, very nice. It gives us like a solid 80 int or something like that. This is Leech, this is Pen. All this other stuff is not really that important, just boilerplate stuff that gives us more damage and just kind of like the more efficient ways to, build towards this. For our ascendancies, we're just taking endless munitions. You can either go through the far shot path or you can go through the ricochet path. The far shot path is better for like normal mapping. The ricochet path is better for blights because you can get the ice cage and the ricochets will chain off of the ice cage walls. Gives you pretty significantly more single target damage. And then no matter what, you're going Gathering Wind for Tailwind, and then you're going Focal Point for increased effective marks. It's just really good because we are definitely going to be using marks, not only for frenzy charges, but the marks that we're going to be using are very, very good. Pretty much more damage multipliers for our build. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the tree. Awesome. So for the gear, I'm just gonna go through really quickly, like at the high level, what you want on all of your gear. Keep in mind that we have trade links for pretty much all of this stuff. So if you want to buy the body armor, you can just kind of look at this trade link. If you want to buy the gloves, buy the helmet, whatever, you can go and you can just search for it really easily. I will say, however, there are some things you can do with the crafts that are going to be a lot cheaper. And I would highly recommend that you do a lot of the crafts, which I'm going to go into in the next section. But if you're just someone who wants to just buy everything, you can just go and buy everything. So firstly, our wand. This you can actually just buy. There's a lot of these on trade right now and they're quite cheap, like 20 to 25 div at least. That's how much they costed yesterday. And you just really want these 2 influence mods, which give you increased lightning damage and spell damage per int, as well as weapon pen, attack speed, and crit chance. You can straight up buy that, but you can also craft it if it's more expensive than I would say 25 div. For the shield, I would recommend that you only use a rare shield if you are having troubles capping your resistances. Otherwise, if you have no problems capping resistances, I highly recommend that you go the Fallborn Esh's Mirror Shield, which gives you just a ton of damage, and also it makes it so you are reflect immune. The next thing you're gonna wanna go for is the helmet. This is really straightforward. It's just high int with resistances and good defensive prefixes like that give you more energy shield. The notable thing here is that you want to have the 7% increased mana reservation efficiency Eldritch Implicit. That makes it so that you can use a level 3 Enlightened in your aura setup instead of a level 4. So you can save like 15-20 div there. Next, we want the Regalia. This is just as much ES as we can get, as well as having some sort of resistance and int. I would say you probably want at least tier 2 int here, and then you just have the increased attributes as a crafted suffix. This circlet here, you can buy or craft. It's very easy to craft this. This Regalia is very easy to craft, but at the same time, because of the breach tree, people are shitting these out. So they're really cheap to buy as well. You can probably buy one of these for like 4 div. Not triple tier 1, but like with 1k, 1050 ES, you can definitely buy this for like 4 or 5 div. The gloves, these are also really easy to craft, but you can also buy them on trade for like 5 or 6 div too. If it's like 7 or 8 div, I would recommend probably just crafting it yourself. But here, notably, you just want attack speed, int, and then this attack speed while focused mod, and then some sort of energy shield as your prefixes, just to get some more ES. For your boots, you just want some sort of movement speed roll. You don't really need 35, 30 is more than good enough. And then you just want int and resistances as the suffix. As you can tell, you really just want a lot of int and resistances as your suffixes and a lot of ES for your prefixes on pretty much all your gear. Now we're kind of getting into a little bit more complicated stuff. So for this amulet, ideally you want a synth base that gives you 15% increased intelligence as your implicit. Then you just want more intelligence, some crit chance, crit multi, and then spell damage, attributes, energy shield, that kind of stuff. You might not be able to get one like this cheap on trade, but you can definitely get one that has some combination of these stats. Maybe not 6 out of 6, but like 4 out of 6 or something like that for quite cheap. And then you can just craft on reduced mana costs for the implicit as well. I'm going to skip the rings really quick and go to the belt because this is also synth based. So it just has the 18%, 15% increased intelligence as the implicit. And here you need to have 59% avoid shock chance or higher. On top of that, you're going to want resistances and or int as a suffix. And then for the prefixes, you're going to want ES and then wed. You need 59% avoid being shocked because that in combination with your boot Eldritch implicit brings you to 100% chance to avoid being shocked. With our Stormshroud Drool, makes it so we have a 100% chance to avoid all ailments. Actually mandatory to do this. Next, we have rings. For the rings, you just want spell damage, increased energy shield, resistances, intelligence, that kind of stuff. The second one is the same thing pretty much, but it also has increased endurance charges and chance to gain endurance charges on kill. This is slightly more expensive, but still buyable for like maybe 3 or 4 div and craftable for like probably 2 div. Those are your options for rings. And then for flasks, it's all really straightforward. Jade Flask plus Stibnite Flask for more evasion, Silver Flask for onslaught, Quicksilver Flask just for movement speed, and then a Diamond Flask for crit damage. For the affixes, you pretty much always want increased duration as the prefix. That is just the best in slot mod for non-mage blood flasks. But for the suffixes, you're going to want reduced effective curses, increased evasion rating, movement speed, chance to avoid being stunned, this is mandatory, and increased critical strike chance during effect. Now, if you have a Jade Flask, which is an evasion flask, and you have the increased evasion suffix, it's going to be incredibly expensive, especially high rolled. It's going to be like 2 or 3 div. Same thing for the Diamond Flask. It's crit chance flask with a crit chance suffix, that's going to be really expensive. However, if you buy like a Diamond Flask that has the evasion roll, it's going to be like half the price. And if you buy an evasion flask with the crit chance roll, it's also going to be half the price. So if you mix and match the suffixes, you end up spending like half the amount of currency that you would normally. So you only need to make sure you have all these suffixes. They don't need to be on the corresponding flasks. And then last but not least, we have our Eshgraphs. These are just going to be for the bases. You're going to want 1 movement speed one and then 1 global critical strike chance one. You don't need to have those. That's like more min-max. If it's a lot cheaper to not have them, you can. But then for the mods, the only thing you really care about is getting 4% increased int. You can even settle on 3% increased int if it gets a little bit more expensive, but I'm pretty sure these were like 1 to 3 div. 1 div you could find them for if you set up an active filter. I was able to buy mine for like 3 div. Very, very cheap. But that's pretty much it for like the high level, what you want on your gear. This next section is going to be how you can craft pretty much every single one of these items. I would say notably, you'd want to do these crafts specifically for your belts, your rings, your amulets. But anyways, let's get right into it then. This wand, this is like an easy self-craft, an insano wand in terms of like the value you get. I'm pretty sure the mirror wand only gives you like a 55% increase to this wand, and this wand only costs you like 20 div to craft or buy on trade. Unfortunately, awakened orbs are really expensive right now, and veiled exalts are also really expensive, so you might be better off buying this on trade versus crafting it. But if you were to craft it, or if the prices of these wands go up pretty significantly, all you really need to do is alt spam 2 separate bases, one with Shaper and the Elder mods, which is the increased spell damage per int, and then the increased lightning damage per int. And then all you need to do then is awaken orb them together. You're probably going to want to beast lock them to make sure that you don't have a third prefix. So after you do that, all you need to do is Veiled Exalt, hit the prefix on the Veiled Exalt. I think this is probably the best case scenario. You then get this Penetrate Elemental Resistance mod. But if you don't hit that, that's totally okay. If you hit a suffix, what you're probably going to want to go for is either the attack speed with int or the increased crit chance with int. And if you miss both of those somehow, you can also go for like increased attack speed while rare is nearby, or DD, something like that, whatever you really want. But I think these two are going to be the 2 best suffixes. And then when you unveil, you can also block modifiers. So I don't know which one you'd want to block, but probably something like one of these dot modifiers. You can block all 4 with just any one of the crafted dot modifiers for before you unveil. And then assuming that you hit one of the 3 good mods that you want to hit on the unveil, all you have to do then is multi-mod and then add the 2 that you didn't. I would say the gloves though are ones that you might need to craft yourself, which is really easy to craft. All you do is you get the fractured prefix of max ES. These cost like 10C on trade right now. And then you just attack speed spam until you get tier 1 int, and then an open suffix, which you're going to annul every time you hit tier 1 int with the attack speed essence. And then once you have the open suffix, you're just going to want to lock suffixes and then Veiled Chaos, unveil for the attack speed while focused. And then you can just craft on the energy shield. Assuming that you miss the 50-50 on the Veiled Chaos one time, it's going to cost you around like 8 div to craft on average. But if you can buy them on trade for cheaper, then do that. And then The boots are pretty straightforward too. These are kind of expensive, so it might actually be better just to buy these on trade, but essentially what you're going to do is you're going to Spite Essence. These are like 5C each. These are kind of expensive. The Zeal Essences for the attack speed are only like 1.5 chaos each, so this is like 3 times more expensive than that. And then you're just going to want like good resistances on your boots. Tier 1, Tier 4 here is fine. Like Tier 3 also probably acceptable. It depends on how much you really need. And then what you do is you can, with your suffixes filled, you can Bristle Matron to block suffixes, and then you can just Veiled Chaos for Veiled movement speed. This one is the best one, having hybrid percentage movement speed, and also the movement speed if you haven't been hit is the best case scenario. And then again, you just craft on the energy shield here. And these are pretty solid boots, very, very cheap to do as well. You can buy them on trade for pretty cheap too if you are too lazy to do that. For the implicits for the gloves and the boots and like all the items, like you can pretty much just copy those 1-to-1. For the most part, like it's just like more damage or more tankiness, 3% damage gain per 100 int. That's just more damage. Rage on hit, incredibly valuable, more damage. But for the boots specifically, these are actually really important. The avoid chance to be shocked is going to work in conjunction with our belt for the 59 chance to avoid being shocked to reach a total of 100. Again, we have a Storm Shroud Viridian Jewel. Essentially makes it so if we can avoid shock 100%, then we can avoid all ailments 100%. And this is incredibly important, like 100% mandatory. So you need some combination of avoid shock on your boots and belt. That's how we're getting it, at least, to reach 100%. Now, if you roll like 39% on the avoid shock, you can actually use Blessed Orbs to change these implicits as well, or change the roll. So getting 41% is pretty easy to do, which means you only need to get 59% on the belt, which can be dived, or you can just make sure you roll 59 on the essences for how you craft the belt, which is like another good segue into what you do for the belt, which is just you buy one of these synthesized belts that has increased int, the Deafening Essence of Torment, to guarantee this 56 to 60 roll of avoid being shocked. And then all you're going to do is you're going to spam these until you have tier 1 res suffix, and then either an open third suffix. If you have your suffixes filled, you can just 1 and 3 annul until you have open suffix. From here, you are just going to, suffixes can't be changed, Veiled Chaos. It's a 50-50 to go prefix or suffix, and then you're going to want to unveil int. It's very, very likely to hit int, some sort of a hybrid int because it's int dex or int strength. And then you're set on your suffixes. Because your suffixes are filled, you can Wild Bristle Matron, which only costs half a div to guarantee suffix block. And then you can just either reforge defense for energy shield, or you can reforge attack for attack skills. Hitting energy shield is a lot better. It just has a much better roll. But the problem is that reforging defense, you have a 50-50 between ES and armor. So you would have to do twice as many rolls on average in order to hit. And there is a chance when you reforge defense or reforge attack, there's a 1 in 12, I believe, to fill the prefixes. And if you fill the prefixes and you don't hit what you want, you are fucked, because you then have to win a 50-50 annul in order to open up a prefix in order to do suffixes can't be changed again. So the cheapest way is to just reforge attack and get the guaranteed wed, and then craft on the energy shield. And then the more expensive but better way would be to roll the reforged defense for a 50-50 on the ES and then craft on the wed with the superior bench craft. But that's pretty much it for the belt. So for the rings, they're pretty straightforward. There are a lot of like half completed rings on the market, and it's really easy to finish the craft if you know how to. So you're gonna end up finding a lot of really good bases that are like the suffixes are filled, and then we have one good prefix or something like that. And the rest of the ring can be finished very easily and deterministically. So what I'm going to recommend that you do is you're going to come onto the notes section and go to the Ringcraft Base 1 EC, take the link. It's going to bring you to a trade filter like this. And this filter is going to give us, for the suffixes, tier 1 int, good resistances, and endurance charge on kill. You can also look for a good prefix, but I would say that might be harder to find on the trade filter, especially if a lot of people end up doing this craft. But like right here, you can find one ring that has all of this for 35C, and it has tier 3 max ES, which is perfect because all we have to do from here is slam a Crusader Orb for a 5 out of 6 chance of hitting something really, really good. On top of that, this orb only costs like 1.25 div or something like that, but it will also give us Crusader influence, which will be very necessary later when we upgrade to a Bound by Destiny, in which case we will need 2 Crusader influenced items. So it's really easy to get them on the rings and really cheap to do so. The total cost for this ring will only be like 2 div. If, however, it gets to the point though where it's hard to find these ring bases with a good prefix, all you need to do is Wild Bristle Matron to lock suffixes, and then Veiled Chaos for one of these hybrid flat damage rolls. And then you just continue the step, slam the Crusader Orb, and after you slam the Crusader Orb, all you need to do is benchcraft on the 7 less mana for channeling. And it's just like that, you're done. You only really need one of these endurance charge per kill rings though. I would recommend most likely what you're gonna need to do is instead go to this ring base 2 filter. All we're doing here is the same thing, but instead of the endurance charge, we're just getting way more resistances, or we're going to get something like attributes. Another thing that's acceptable is getting like strength as a suffix here, just because you're going to need some strength in order to fill out your red gems later. I also threw on a guaranteed good prefix here. You can just remove this if you don't want to do that, or if they get more expensive later. But as you can see, you can buy rings that are like very, very solid. Insano resistances, 102 res, tier 1 int, with tier 3 max ES for incredibly cheap. And all you have to do from here is just slam the Crusader Orb and then craft on the mana cost reduction benchcraft. And then you're good to go. These rings should not cost you more than 2.5 div to essentially get like a 6 or 7 div value ring. Very, very nice and very, very easy to do. I highly recommend that you just straight up craft these yourself. They are so cheap. Yeah, that's it for the rings. And then the body armor, incredibly cheap. I think we bought this one for 4 or 5 div last night. And what you just want here is tier 1 int, but honestly, you can settle for tier 2 int, as well as some sort of resistance. Tier 3 would probably be the lowest you'd want to go, but maybe tier 4. Depends on if you are having troubles capping your resistances or not. Just high ES. Like this is pretty shitty. It's only like 1k ES, but again, it's really cheap. I think I actually might be crafting and selling one right now. This one would probably be worth like 15 div, and this is like what, 1200 ES. This one is like 200 ES less, but it's like a third of the cost. So you can kind of play with the numbers a little bit, but we'll have the trade link filter for it in the notes. This one I just bought, and I would recommend that you buy, but if you want to craft it yourself, that's also really easy to do. Recombine the prefixes 1-to-1, 2-to-2, and then Eldritch Currency, the int. If you don't know what I mean by recombine 1-to-1, 2-to-2, I have an axe crafting video on YouTube, which kind of details how you do it with axes, but it's the exact same process, except a lot easier to do with regalias because the weightings for the tier 1 prefixes are a lot higher. The last thing that we have here is the amulet. The amulets are pretty straightforward. You can self-craft these or you can buy these, but you don't need like tier 1s for everything. Like you don't need tier 1 crit, but all you really do if you want to self-craft this is you're just going to want to spite spam this again until you hit like tier 1, tier 2, at worst, probably tier 3 all attributes. And then you're going to want open suffix. If you don't have an open suffix, you can just 1 and 3 annul. And if you miss, you just restart. And then once you have the open suffix, all you're going to do is suffix block and then reforge crit. It's either increased global crit or increased global crit multi. Both are acceptable, and that's what we're going for. You're just going to reforge for that. You're probably going to want like tier 4 or above on that, but ultimately you can settle here however you like. And then afterwards, all you do is you just block suffixes with a Wild Bristle Matron. This costs half a div. Reforge defenses for max ES. And then you could just YOLO slam and exalt, blocking like life or mana or something. And then afterwards, you just craft the non-channeling mana cost. And you are done. Quite easy to craft, probably costs you like 7, maybe 10 div, or a little bit more expensive, but better rolls that are guaranteed. I would do that as well. Again, trade link in the notes for that. Okay, for the helmet, it's really straightforward. I'm just gonna go ahead and recommend that you just buy this one. It's just not worth it to craft because of how cheap these are. I'm pretty sure the Breach Tree will just shit these out very, very easily. So if you look here, if you want to get 70% LE res or above, which is like tier 2, tier 3, with tier 1 int and 400 ES, it only costs you 5 div. If you lower the energy shield to like 350, it's like 2 div. I would 100% recommend that you just buy the helmet. It's way, way cheaper to buy than to craft. You can go Grand Ichor to get 9% mana reservation on the implicit for this helmet. And that allows you to use Enlightened 3 support, which is like 20 div cheaper than Enlightened 4, in order to get all of your auras on. And then last but not least, for our shield, I highly recommend that you use one of these Foulborn Esches Mirrors. It makes it so you cannot be reflected. So you are Bing chilling on pretty much every reflect map. You might be thinking we have Awakened Wed in our body armor, so like we don't care about that, but that's actually not true because this only applies to our KB, but it does not apply, for example, to our Tornado, which actually does pretty significant damage and will oftentimes kill us. And on top of that, it's just OP as fuck. It gives you a ton of flat damage. Like this will, if you're doing a Blight or if you're doing something where you're killing a lot of mobs, this will easily like triple, quadruple your damage. However, you can only run this if your resistances are all set on your other gear. Like for example, I'm missing like 7% res here. It easily just be fixed by like reforging my fire reses up. But for the purpose of this video, only use the Foulborn Esches Mirror if you have your resistance cap. Otherwise, you can use just like a normal high ES, high elemental resistance shield that you can find on trade quite cheaply for like 1 or 2 div. But yeah, that's all the gear. The implicits are like pretty straightforward. This gain us extra fire is pretty much just there because very, very soon you are going to drop this silver flask for this Cinder Swallow, which pretty much just gives you the onslaught, but at the same time also gives you like 15% more damage if you have some sort of way to ignite, and we get our ignite from the 4% fizz. One last thing we can go over is the gems. So we have Volatility, Wed, Fork, Returning Projectiles, Kinetic Blast, Sacred Wisps. These are pretty much like best in slot for your KB. you want to upgrade your fork to Awakened Fork as soon as possible. This is probably the first upgrade that you can get. It's going to give you so much more damage and it's going to make your clear so much better. That, however, is going to be like a 28 div cost. That's level 1. Only goes up to level 5 for Awakened Gems. But if you type in Awakened Gem level 5, it's going to cost you like 31 div. So it's like 3 more div to do this. But you can actually just level these up yourself just by going to the bestiary. You can use this beast here, Wild Brambleback, to level up your Awakened Gems. Less than a div total to get from level 1 to level 5, so you can save 2 div there as well if you want to do that. After that, we're just going to be doing like Tornado, Culling Strike support, Spell Slinger, Power Charge on critical support. This is our Power Charge generation. It's very important. Faster attacks, Momentum, Shield Charge. This is just like classic our movement ability here. And then you can go Wall of Force, Sigil of Power. You put this down, you cast your abilities in it. This is like a single target ability, like when you're fighting a boss, you're fighting some uniques that are really hard to kill in a Blight. You put this down, you cast in it, increases your damage. You have focus from your gloves. This gives you like 50% increased attack speed. Then we just have pretty much our auras, which is Grace, Precision, and Wrath. With the Enlightened, we just barely are able to use everything. So as you can see here, we still have 114 mana unreserved. Because of our jewelry benchcrafts, we can cast our abilities very, very cheaply. So it's not a problem at all to have only 114 mana. This Sniper Mark is how we're going to be generating our Frenzy Charges with this Mark Mastery. Sniper's Mark is also incredibly good. It's just increased damage, plus, like, you know, the Mark Mastery makes it more effective. And then also, you know, we have the Focal Point Ascendancy. That's pretty much all there is to it. We just have Shield Charge as our movement ability, and then Frost Blink or Flame Dash. It's up to you, whichever one you feel is better. And then we also have Wall of Force. So this is used for like bosses. It just gives you a terrain to bounce your KBs off of to help you DPS. So let me show you really quickly what a map looks like here. So this is going to be like the blue Blight setup that I have a YouTube video on. It's Double Scarabs, Bloodlines, Blightheart, Invig. These are some crazy mods on there. It's like pretty much 400% extra gain as Element. It's going to get up to like 600, maybe 700 after the mods, and also Crit Strike plus multi. Let's see how we do against it. Grab the Bismuth, make it even harder. You'd want to clear the whole map and all that stuff, but let's just skip that. We're here to showcase how good the build is, and let's take a look at it. 6th lane, that's like kind of standard, I would say. There are some splits here. Oh, actually, no, there aren't. But yeah, as you can see, we're getting chunked quite a bit. The mobs are pretty strong here. Let's set up our towers. And let's just take a look at how we can hold up against some of the hardest content in the game. I would say Blue Blight isn't like the worst. Obviously, like Titanic Legend Blight is going to be way harder, but this is probably like in the top 3 like most difficult content in the game. Those meteors are doing a number on us as well, meteors and tornadoes, so we got to be careful for those. And as long as we move around, there are very few things that are just going to straight up one-shot us, but we're going to definitely have some trouble later on in these Blights when we get to the point where we have to deal with like a proximity shield or something like that. Because those proximity shields, we're going to need to get up in there, and that is when like the real tank test happens. Oh, my bad. Let one slip, didn't realize. And you know, it's just classic like Paws of Exile here. And the reason why we set up these ice cages, and as you can see, like if there's a monster in the ice cage, we absolutely just shotgun blast their ass down. Like boom, one shot of pretty juiced unique Blight. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Like we're incredibly tanky, we have good mobility, we have good survivability. Oh, and we have really good damage, especially when we have some sort of projectile, some sort of wall. We're able to tank some pretty gnarly hits from mobs just because we have such a huge hit pool. And then if an ability doesn't like one-shot us, we are able to just completely just out regen like the subsequent hits. So it's just really nice to have because of our Ghost Reaver, because of all of our damage, and because we're ES based, right? Set up one of these here. And then yeah, that's just how it is. Like we're incredibly tanky, we do a lot of damage. And there's a lot of stuff that, like, this is an incredibly insane map mods, but like look right there, we were 1 HP, and then we're able to just pretty much full regen. I know you're thinking like, holy shit, 17k HP and we almost get one shot still. I mean, that's true, but like if you look, this is 1k critical strike chance, 117 crit multi, 300 fire and cold, and another 300 extra as a random element. So it's like 600 extra as an additional element with 4k Wild Wisp on the map. And we're not getting one shot. And as you see, if we don't get one shot, then we don't die because we pretty much insta leech all of our HP back. So the build is incredibly survivable. It's also incredibly tanky. As you saw, we were able to just absolutely melt those Blight mobs. And if you've done unique Blight before, you know how tanky those can get. Just really, really solid. I just felt like this build took all the upsides to KB, which is like the mobility, the clear speed, and then worked on some of its weaknesses, which is its lack of survivability and also its issues with single target that we can kind of address just by using like the Esh's Mirror shield, plus, you know, obviously a lot of the instack pen stuff that we have on our wand. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole build. So the last thing I think I can go over here are going to be the priority of your upgrades. So if you look here, we have 3 different loadouts. 1 is budget 3, 2, and 1. So budget 3 is going to be the cheapest, 2 is going to be the middle, and then 1 is going to be the most expensive. Even 1 is less than a mirror. So if you look here in the notes section, these are going to be the 4 upgrades that I recommend that you prioritize first after you have all of your gear set up. The first is going to be Awakened Fork. It just gives you an insane amount of damage, and this is the thing that's going to give you a noticeable difference when you play the game. Next, you're probably going to want a Cinder Swallow just because this is pretty cheap. It's only like 8 div or something like that. And it'll give you a solid like 10-15% damage boost. And as a result, you're going to need to have this Fizz as Fire, Boot, and Blizzard in order to give you Ignite. Next, you're probably going to want your Great Wolf Talisman. This is like 35 to 40 div, I think, but this will increase your DPS by a solid 30% more damage. And then Bound by Destiny is going to be really nice. You're going to need to make sure you have 2 Crusader rings at this point, or a Crusader helmet. And this will just give you straight up 15% more intelligence, which is quite a significant increase to our survivability and damage. Besides that though, if you toggle between like the 2 budgets, you'll see like the gear increases pretty marginally. A lot of these changes you're gonna see are gonna be increases to like just int, ES, that kind of stuff. So like for the gloves, you go from like going from 20% quality gloves to going to like 25% quality gloves that have better rolls. Same thing for the Regalia, going from like tier 3 budget to tier 1 budget, you go from like 1050 ES to 1230, something like that. These are all pretty marginal increases that are just nice to have. Going from the first Regalia to this one is probably going to be like 15 div. And then going from like the first helmet to this one might actually be closer to like going from 5 div to 50 div for what is a pretty nice increase, but not something that you need on your build by any means. These are going to be more min-max upgrades for your gear, and it's just going to be kind of pushing the envelope a little bit, taking the stuff that you already have and just making it a little bit better. Anyways, that is it for the whole video. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is my first time doing a video like this, so if you have any sort of like constructive criticism for what I can do better in the next ones, let me know. Also, if you're interested in seeing me do a more focused crafted video where I can kind of show you how to craft all of these best gear that you can get, like the absolute top of the line gear for as cheap as possible, I could do that as well, but I'm not sure if there is interest in that since I kind of went through how you do everything already, although I went through it pretty quickly. Let me know in the comments below. I can definitely whip up a video like that pretty quickly. With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys liked the video, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I hope to see you guys again in the next one.